Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight, we are going to be taking a journey through our life story. What is it all about? Can we traverse timelines? Can we go into other dimensions? Perhaps can we go beyond the veil? Find our spirit guides? See what really makes us tick? Or what is this life all about? All of these questions and thoughts we've had many times over the past few decades, and each little piece is a part of our puzzle. But is it really a puzzle? Or perhaps, is it part of the cosmic awareness that we are now on the precipice of? We're really having this spiritual awakening now. We're really opening up to different things around us. No longer is it a 9-to-5 job where you have children, you have an education, you go out, create your legacy, and then put a little stamp at the end and say, okay, I'm done, and move on to the next journey. It's really about what can we gather from our experiences around us? What are we breathing in? What would we like to see going forward? And how can we take what is coming through to our mind, our conscious awareness, even our subconscious, and are they beginning to open up? What are we sensing, hearing, knowing, being guided to journey through? Today, my guest is Bryce Kriegman. His very first book, is Killing on the River Broad. And what we'll be talking about today is truly about a journey traversing timelines, dimensions, and reality while still in conscious awareness through story. Bryce, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So glad to have you, because I think sometimes when we start to write a book and we say, I'm not sure where it's going to go, I'm just going to let it unfold. Don't you think that's exactly what your book was about?
Absolutely true, and it's funny how you mentioned that. When I began writing it, I was sitting in my apartment. I was kind of sketching out some of the themes that I wanted in the book, and I decided to just go on a break, and I just needed some personal space. So I took a drive down to Sandy Hook, which is a large natural area in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And on the way down, I was just letting the story unfold in my head. And by the time that I had gotten there, about an hour drive, I had most of the story there, but it wasn't totally complete. I don't think it had the final spark I needed. But there were a lot of kinds of signs to me when I was out there in nature doing these little hikes that really tied it together. And the first bit of writing I did was actually out there in my car looking at the ocean. And it truly needed time to unfold. And I didn't know where it was going, but I think the signs were there that pointed me in the right direction.
Mostly when I read your book, it truly was about collecting soul fragments through many interdimensional kind of spaces. And it almost seemed as if you could open up and clear your perspective and walk through a veil. Each page, you took a descriptive story, and it was almost as if you had been in another location, another time, another space, and then you flip your body around, kind of come out of body, and write the story from that perspective. Is that maybe what it seems as?
That's right. I think there are many perspectives we need to take to traverse life. I don't think we can create our own perception, and we can get really caught in our own perception. I think we need to take a step back and experience the world as it is. And as it is can be through many veils, but we need to take a step back and get out of our own heads to perceive who we are and where we fit in kind of a global community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important, too, because sometimes we take on story and we say, this is my story. You know, a lot of times there's been many guests on the radio over the decades, and we look and we say, oh, but I went back in my past life and I was part of this, or I did my DNA and this is my lineage and I'm part of that, and that is, I have that within me.
Right.
But yet what happens is then you start to become an ownership of the identity and the story, and you aren't free to be able to just take the aspects and say, breathe in and breathe out, got it, and then shed it to move on. Sometimes we get stuck with it, and we end up being this big koosh ball of all of these entities, when in essence that wasn't really the purpose, do you think?
And our existence as individuals and what we create for ourselves is not all of what we are. I think there's a lot more to it. I think our interactions with other individuals, our interaction with nature are all defining attributes of who we are. We can't exclusively live off of what we've created for ourselves. There's more than that.
Right. You know, it's so interesting. Many times over the years, I've shared the story that our soul has one trajectory, okay? And we intersect with another trajectory, which is the ancestral, like mother, father, brother, sister, whatever that might be. And when we intersect it, our avatar downloads all of that ancestral information, and you become part of it. In other words, it locks you in. And then what happens is when we leave that trajectory, and we say, but do we carry all that ancestral stuff with us? The answer is no. Our soul is now free if we are releasing that Rolodex, so to speak. I think sometimes when we go back into these stories and we say, I feel like I've been here, I feel like I've done this, it's to feel that part of that soul fragment you may have left at that space and time, which was not part of your current. But when you go back in time and you feel it and you sense it and you know it, then that's when you reclaim the energy of it versus the story of it. Don't you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that in your book, you know, when your character starts to go back and says that they're looking for a sense of peace. Isn't peace just collecting the parts of the soul remnant?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it is collecting the many parts of ourselves. The awareness and of the self as well is so important as that, and the many faceted parts of the self. Complete life is not these simple ideals we set for ourselves. For example, the main character in the book very much defined himself by his job and his role as a protector and provider for his family. He does eventually come around to the point that realizing that he hasn't fully explored that relationship to others or that relationship with himself. But at least in the beginning, he is only superficially aware of how he needs to explore the relationship with himself and the greater world. And the book really is about that journey of starting to, as you put it, collecting those soul fragments. And it's a long journey. I think people assume these things are simple, but it's a process, and you have to trust the process.
Yeah, I think that if we believe that it is just this lifetime and we're going to get it all together, pretty much we will come to a realization. We will pretty much hang over the edge and kind of implode upon ourselves, and then something else will show up and we'll say, now I get it. Maybe it's much greater. Maybe it is bigger than, and maybe we are all part of this other greater one, versus thinking it's just all about me, my story. Do you know what I mean? And yeah. What I loved about the book is, I've written down the very first sentence when I picked it up. I wrote, "The river travels like a spirit of nature on earth." So pretty much, I think your character stepped into spirit form to travel along the river, and engage in nature as the other parts of their reality, right?
Precisely, right on the dot. The main character and another, I don't want to spoil too much, but another character who comes into the scene, they're all traveling on a river together. And there are absolutely multiple planes on which that they're all moving together, and they come to intersect or recognize where they're intersecting at different nodes is the way that I think of it. And it is certainly a journey. And it is a journey is the best way to put it. It's not something given, but it is something to travel through.
Right, because it's really almost as if it's a dimensional timeline, you know? And you had written something in the book. You said, mind volumes of history intentionally forgotten. And I think that's really important, because when we definitely look at all of the dimensions that we travel back into, are they forgotten because we haven't brought them with us? Are they forgotten because they aren't important at this time? Or perhaps are they forgotten and just sitting on the side waiting for the right time? Because sometimes when you go back into these dimensions, we say, do we go back into them with our perspective of the moment we are today? Or maybe it's not time. We have to have a better awareness or a different perspective, and then it will show up. It's sort of like, that whole stop and smell the roses. Nobody ever did that for decades, you know? And then all of a sudden, it was a little tagline. You found it on T-shirts, or people were talking about it, you know? So, in other words, it wasn't in space and time. It hadn't been created yet. Do you think?
Yeah, that's a lovely point. I mean, I love to think about why some of these things are forgotten. I love that idea that it's just waiting for the right moment.
Yeah. Let's talk for a second. I think there's a lot of aspects in your book about also when you talk about the deer, and I immediately said, spirit guide.
Right.
So,
yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, you have a lot of references in your book about spirit guides. In essence, you don't want to be dragging up your best friend or your other stories. You don't want what your reality is to always come into your exploration of your spiritual sense. You want something different to guide you so you can create the story, don't you think?
Yeah. I'm always looking for inspiration, and I've certainly found spirit guides, good omens, bad omens in the world that I'm always for, and there's a lot to be given to us, I believe.
Yeah, I think if we look at the deer, deer have the greatest sense of peace, of kind of I almost look at them like, when you're sitting next to somebody and you're really not talking, but boy, you're really doing a lot of telepathy, and you're saying who's going to say something first, who's going to not, you know what I mean? It's kind of that idea. And I really find that deer are very strong in their telepathic base, because you really don't know, you're just in presence with them, and it's very much a silent thing, don't you think so?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I always think of coming across deer when I'm hiking, and there's kind of this recognition. They look at you, you look at them, where you're sizing one another up. And you can move in a certain way, I found, having encountered so many deer on hikes, towards them in a certain manner to where they don't feel threatened. And you can come really close, and there's absolutely that kind of communication with them that's really beautiful, I think.
Yeah, it's almost they show up, and you kind of, I remember all these decades of with deers. One time I was pulling into someone's house, and it was snowing, and instantly, within a flash, this huge deer buck was in front of my car, like 2 inches in front of my car, just standing there in the snow. And I said, how can this deer fit between the grill of my car and the garage that I'm in front of? And so I'm sure it was a spirit animal essence. And it just stood there. And then in a blink of a moment, it was gone again. So I think sometimes they are true spirits. Don't you think so? Yeah, definitely.
I think they can communicate in all kinds of ways that we're not able to, that are absolutely beautiful. And I think I see that in so many animals. There are many where I felt a certain connection to them. Dolphins are another one, having spent a lot of time surfing. I think they're truly beautiful creatures. I think they are incredibly intelligent and can interact with us in so many interesting ways.
Do you think that also, too, you wrote in your book about destruction of man? We talk about that a lot. Is man fighting against man? Is man fighting against mind? Is man fighting against his fears? Is he fighting against the unknown? We see that. And a lot of times people will say, well, I'm going to take up and I'm going to have this job and it's going to protect me against man. So it's going to protect me against my fears, my feeling like something's going to take me out, in essence. In other words, we really come up with this separation. I think, the human existence right now in the year 2022 is greatly divided. There are so many separations that we've kind of become something we almost don't even recognize anymore.
Right.
And so I think that in essence, when you go on a spiritual journey, just as you shared in your book, it's truly about take it to the nth degree. What is the separation, and what is that trying to tell me? Do you think?
Yeah, completely. That's a theme I've been exploring, and I actually want to continue to explore. We as humans have a natural aversion to fear and risk and the unknown. You never know what's going to come at you out of the dark, right? But we have created so much, we've built up so much society to protect ourselves from that unknown. And in that unknown is where we can really learn and grow. People often say, actually in boredom or in moments of transition, are when they have their most creative thoughts, when there's uncertainty or there's lack of stimulus. And I find that we've created so many barriers to protect ourselves that we've actually lost who we are. We've lost being truly in touch with ourselves. And that's absolutely what this explores. The main character in the book has spent much of his life building up walls around himself. And it also delves into the history of how we've been doing this for generations. When the pioneers first went west in America, they built walls, right? They had to protect themselves. But there were walls inside their heads, and the walls never stopped being built. It went from walls ringing villages to now we have walls around smaller communities within the greater community. And I really think that we need to start tearing down these walls and identifying where we built walls that we didn't even know existed.
But is it not, Bryce, if you look at it, the ultimate existential spiritual question is, who are we? Are we still locked into that whole identity that our humanness is who we are, instead of our spiritual soul is who we are? Because once we traverse that, okay, so if something happens and we leave this lifetime, that's just a chapter in the book. It's not the book. And you really have to approach that question. Once you're able to say, I don't fear death, okay, that's just another window. I'll move to the next building and I'll move to the next phase. If we can see that, be unafraid of that, then maybe our existence might shift a little bit. But once we're in this humanness, we're really stuck in this humanness, that's where the really issues occur. But I think that eventually we will be able to shed this humanness and be more spirit-like. But once man took on this human form, we are stuck in a paradigm, and we are existing from that paradigm, and everything that we are seeing, it has to go through that primordial veil of humanness. So in essence, we're really trying really hard to be the spirit, but we still have that veil of humanness, and that's where we're stuck, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. And what you said about death is exactly a wall. Once we can free ourselves from that construct that we've created for ourselves mentally, we are more free. We can really experience this life and the gifts that we've been given in this life. And I think you're right. I think we are absolutely constrained mentally. I think physically in these forms we're constrained. I believe we can work with what we have. My key philosophical thought is that God has given us gifts to live in this world, and we need to be receivers of those gifts, and we need to act with them and upon them. And that's how I think we can elevate our own consciousnesses, and I think that's how we can elevate the consciousnesses of society.
Yeah, I almost look at it as this year 2022. I say we're truly now getting to the point where the gifts are supposed to open up, and we're supposed to now start aligning ourselves along the inner outside of the balloon. Because when we're ready to pop through it, we aren't taking any of this dogma that we've created, all this knowingness, all this whatever, legacy, all that stuff is not coming with us. So when we start having this awareness to say, I don't fear death, I understand that. I see it's chapters. It's all of this newness. When we get up there, a lot of the old story falls away. In other words, we don't have to work on so hard of being right, of having all of these people around us that will applaud us and celebrate us. We can just see that we can take that lone venture and just diffuse from one space to another in time. And then when we could feel okay with that, isn't that when perhaps the collective will all of a sudden go poof?
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I think that acceptance of the self and not having to be right and love for other individuals, regardless of who they are, is absolutely key. I think that's what we need to grow as a society.
Yeah. Let's talk for a second. In one of your phases in the book, you talked about solid red retina, and I wrote demon beyond a conundrum of emptiness. Do you think perhaps that when we look into our darkest times, we can look at the dark energies, we can pretty much stand in their face and see them for who they are? Beyond that redness of the demon's eyes, I've seen many, black, dark energies in my lifetime stand right in front of them. You can see beyond that. You see something else. But a lot of times people will say, well, do you see the light? Do you see God? Do you see this? I say, no, I see emptiness. And that's what I wrote. Beyond that, you see the cauldron of emptiness. Because when you see that emptiness, isn't that time when things will just almost, you have to think back on your physics classes, when two energies, meet, they no longer exist, what I mean? So if that happens, that can just diffuse, and then it no longer exists. So our dark stories, our dark pains, the ghosts that we see that we might be opening up to, perhaps what we meet in the fears and the frustration in our life. When we get to them and we meet them, can we stare them down, look beyond them, and find so that it can just dissipate?
Right. There's a story, behind individual evil actions and dark thoughts within yourself or within others. There's a story behind that, and you can break that apart, and you can see some of the falsenesses, some of the pretense of some of those things, and we can absolutely dissipate them into nothing, and move beyond and grow. Absolutely, that's something I try to do within myself, within my own fears, is break them down and move beyond and see what I can create from the ashes.
Yeah. What about the idea of building a world for us? Now, the us, what truly is the us? Because if we are really one, everything is one, the us kind of uses the word of a fragmentation. And the word one is of all. So I think sometimes when we see people say, well, I'm creating a life for us, it's almost as if, okay, so you just showed me you're separate, Or I want to do this because and then right there, because, then let's put up what is your world all defined about.
Right.
So I think sometimes when we go on these adventures, just as your character did along the river, and you feel connection with the world around you, you are more open. But it's once you come back into that other space of fears, that's when you get stuck, right?
And you're absolutely on the nose. Who is the us?
Right.
There have been so many revolutions, political revolutions throughout history, and different governmental forms that have formed after them. There's been democracies, but there's also been authoritarian communism, authoritarian fascism. And in each rendition, the proponents of those ideologies said that they were making it for us, that they were making it for that country. But it was just their version of us.
Yeah.
The same thing is true in the story. There's a historical excerpt that the main character reads where it talks about, quote, progress in the Wild West, where settlers were coming out and they were creating their societies and doing extensive logging for the benefit, quote, of us. But the us in that definition were just the white people who were settling there at the loss of the Native Americans. So we really need to come together and find what that us is. We can absolutely get caught in our own definitions of what us is, and it can be a trap.
Yeah.
So proper connection is key.
Do you think that really when your hold on. I think that when your character goes along the river and finds many different ventures and stories and senses different things come up for your character. We don't want to give away the story. I wrote that it's an esoteric painting of the landscape without identity. Because I think you can there are no answers. You have stepped into the unknown. How can we live from the unknown without so many fears? Isn't that truly what our goal is about?
It is. I think my belief, again, goes back to community. I think that we need to support one another in that growth. I don't think there's really any greater value in the world than support from one another. And without that, we can't move beyond.
Yeah. And I think that also, too, if we just look at it and we say, we're at the end of your book, when he tries to come back into humanity, I really see it as, he sees the books and things and he says, what is this time frame from, It's almost as if when we go in and out of body, in and out of dream state, in and out of mantra, in and out of meditation, it's as if we go through humanity's veils over time. So if we take it back to the story that I said before, is it perhaps the soul trying to unlatch from this dimension and traveling in retrograde, going back to their soul line?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think looking back at the soul lines and finding your origin is very important on our journey.
Yeah. And I think what's really great is that when you come to it, too, you decide that what is there out there. And it's almost as if peace, where there's no words. I cannot wait, Bryce, until the day that we get rid of the alphabet. Because the alphabet, words are just, take those letters, throw them up in the air and see what comes down. And it keeps us so locked in, There's so many times, people will call me and they haven't talked to me for 30, 40, 50 years. And they'll ask me a question. And I said, my thoughts, why are you calling me? What's up? And then I know why. Because then they pass away within a week or two. Or they have a deeper question that they can't find an answer. Or perhaps they're just looking for salvation or to know that they can pass on and they'll be okay. So I think that if we can see that life is these very simple questions, might we let go of some of those other stories?
That's a hope. That is absolutely a hope of mine.
Yeah. Well, I also, too, let's talk in closing about truly what happens when we have these experiences. Because just as someone will sit down and read your book, they'll say, I felt that, or I have a story I could tell you about that, or let me share something. In other words, it triggers, it opens up something. And once that happens, then what do you do with it? That's the idea. What do you do with that new knowing, that new awareness? Isn't it what we want?
Definitely. I was listening to one of your other shows, and there was a woman who was talking about, I believe she had a disease for a few years, and she was talking about what you breathe in, what you inhale, and then ask yourself what you exhale, right?
Yeah,
and that's so important, and finding your medium for how you exhale is so great. I mean, I do it through writing and through guitar. I think other people can find that exhalation through charity. There's so many different ways to let it out and see what actions you'll take.
You know, I think it was a great time to have you talking about your book today, Killing on the River Broad, Bryce, because really what it is it's for others to be able to say, maybe this is something that will open me up to my soul journey. And many times people will say, I hit the wall, I had a dark night of the soul, or I'm kind of hanging over the end and I'm not able to survive. And I always say, oh, fantastic, I'm so excited. Tell me what it looks like there. And they're like, what? I'm not doing good. I'm dying. I'm saying, okay, sit there right there. Did you die right this second? No. Okay, then I guess you're not. You know what I mean? I think
like riding a roller coaster.
Right. I think sometimes they're so afraid of the word fear. So many times people will say, but I'm so afraid. And I'll say, sit in a room with nothing in it and welcome in fear. Ask it to come in. Tell it, let's have a little tango. Let's have a little fight. Let's see what you're made out of. And you come out of the room later, an hour later, and hey, fear was there, but I'm still here. So I think, can we face things on and be able to say, this too shall pass?
Yes, we can. Bill Hader, a comedian, had this great quote talking about his own anxiety, a form of fear, where he was saying when he feels it coming on, he sees it as a little buddy next to him. And he recognizes it. He says, hey, buddy, you're with me right now, and I see you there. And that recognition is the first step to conquering it. If you see it, you know what your enemy is, and you can also choose to not fight it. You can go along with it, and you'll see and you'll recognize how strong you are. And that fear is much smaller than the strength that you have.
Right, because in essence, a lot of times people will say, oh, but we need to find balance. And I'll say, well, yin and yang was not meant to be a gray circle. We are always going to have maybe fears and strengths. The difference is to learn how to dance within your existence. That's really what we're talking about. What can you dance with today? Fantastic that you're really sick today because you were looking for that all along. Now what would you like to do? Or, okay, it's really great that everything's good today, but perhaps maybe tomorrow might be different, but we don't concern ourselves with tomorrow. So the idea is learning to dance in your existence, right?
It is. It is really an amazing interplay that we live in this world. It's almost an orchestra of sound happening around us, ups and downs, and dancing within that is part of the beauty of life. Yeah, absolutely. And then you can come into my world where we dance in the ethers. I pretty much stay in that higher space and time, and it's sort of like this humanness just doesn't even resonate anymore. Resonate, right?
Yeah, it's just so different. Well, Bryce, it was a pleasure to have you. Can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here. Killing on the River Broad is available online on Amazon as an ebook right now. Coming up soon, I will be publishing a compilation with some other short stories, so stay tuned for that.
Very good. Well, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. We thank you so much, especially to have a young person's perspective on the process. I myself, being so much older, have a lot of dogma. I have a lot of past history kind of stuff that had to be cleaned up. And it's so nice to be able to have others that will say, but I didn't come in with all of those old stories. I'm not an old soul. I'm a new person that will change the world. And that's what we're really looking forward to. So I think your story pretty much is about that, yes?
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm like my character. I'm on a journey myself. I'm excited to keep growing and learning and absorbing different philosophies and seeing what comes of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being on.
If you'd like to find out more information about Bryce Kriegman, again, the book is Killing on the River Broad. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to where the book is available. And it is about being able to say, what am I open to today? There's so much more... There's so many more questions that we have. There's so much more that we can let go. There is so much more that we can touch, feel, and sense if we are allowing ourselves the opportunity to change our perspective, to say, I really don't know, and be able to say what is out there. On the other side of that black hole in this spiral is a great cosmic awareness. Can we be on that side and dance in the ethers? That's truly about what we're saying, is about can we be free of all of this? It's not about creating more story. It's about letting go of the stories. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr-jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.